a subscriber of mine asked me an interesting question the other day. He said, is Luis Ortiz the new Razor Roddick? And he didn't mean stylistically, because style-wise, Roddick and Ortiz are very, very different. What he meant was in terms of the way they both gained their reputations. Because Razor Roddick, at one point in his career, was viewed as the second most dangerous heavyweight in the world after Mike Tyson. And when Tyson went to prison, there were many people, both among boxing fans and the media, who were saying that Razor Roddick is actually the #1 heavyweight in the world, despite the fact that he wasn't world champion and Evander Holyfield was at the time. How did Roddick get that reputation? Well, he got that reputation mainly by losing to Mike Tyson twice, because he gave Tyson a tough fight both times. The second fight, he went the distance. And Larry Merchant at the time was kind of casting aspersions over Razor Roddick's reputation going into the Lennox Lewis fight. Because he said, I can't trust a guy whose best win was 2 losses to Mike Tyson. Right? His best win, right? How can a loss be a win? But what he meant is his reputation has been built off the back of 2 losses. I'm interested in a fighter whose reputation is built off wins, not losses. Because outside of the 2 losses to Mike Tyson, what did Razor Roddick ever do? So this was Larry Merchant's point. But as I say, Razor Roddick rose to prominence. And one of the things I can at least say for Razor Roddick is that he did beat a few former world champions. He beat Mike Weaver, he beat Bone Crusher Smith, and he beat Michael Dokes. They were all well past their best, but that is still 3 former world champions. And there were some highlight reel knockouts, particularly the Bone Crusher Smith knockout and the Michael Dokes knockout. He hit them with some tremendous shots, and they were highlight reel KOs. And off the back of that, beating those 3 former world champions, he then goes into the Mike Tyson fight. And if you go watch that first Mike Tyson fight, they're talking about the 2 explosive punches and this is going to be a shootout and this, that, and the other. And both Tyson fights were, excellent fights. Razor Roddick acquitted himself very well. But as we should all know by now, styles make fights. Mike Tyson had a particular style which obviously gelled with Razor Roddick's style to make a exciting spectacle. But Razor Roddick was a guy who always struggled with movers. There's actually sparring footage of Razor Roddick and Larry Holmes in the ring. Okay, sparring. And Larry Holmes is schooling Razor Roddick. And this is an old Larry Holmes. He's schooling him. He's moving around, jabbing. And Roddick doesn't look very good. But Mike Tyson is a guy who stands right in front of you. He's going to come at you. And in the Razor Roddick fights, he wasn't moving his head that much. He was moving his head, don't get it twisted. But his head movement wasn't as sharp as it had been in some other fights. So he was a guy who was basically just standing right in front of Razor Roddick, and that's exactly what Razor Roddick wanted from a stylistic point of view. A guy who's going to stand in front of him and let him throw those big left hooks and left uppercuts. The occasional right hand. But when Razor Roddick moved on from the Tyson fights, because Tyson went to prison following a second Razor Roddick fight. He was arrested, he had his trial and all that kind of business. Razor Roddick came back with a couple wins over Greg Page, actually another former world champion. I forgot to mention Greg Page. Greg Page, Phil Jackson, 2 good wins. Then he went into the Lennox Lewis fight. He was favorite in that fight in the eyes of many people. I can't remember what the bookmakers' odds were in the UK at the time, but he was certainly favorite in the eyes of many. This was the first time that Razor Roddick had fought a young contender other than Mike Tyson. And of course, Lennox Lewis, a totally different style. Lewis and Roddick had sparred many times together as amateurs in Canada. So Lewis knew exactly what Roddick was about. And Lewis blew him away. In 2 rounds, Razor Roddick never got close to hurting Lewis or knocking him out or doing many of the things which people expected him to do. Lewis just blasted him away. He moved around for the first round, didn't let Razor Roddick get set, and then he exploited Razor Roddick's poor defense because Roddick was always poor defensively. Knocked him out in 2 rounds. The other time that he fought a young contender, Razor Roddick, was Tommy Morrison. Several years later. And that was a good fight. Both guys were knocked down, but ultimately Morrison stopped Razor Roddick. He hit Roddick with one of the best left hooks that he's ever thrown in his whole career. That was actually the battle of the left hookers, because both guys were known for their left hooks. But the left hook that Morrison hit Razor Roddick with was crazy. Razor Roddick went down like he'd been shot. That was a crazy knockdown. He did actually get up, but he was under serious fire, and the referee ended up stopping it. So, yeah, Razor Roddick built this reputation mainly off the back of 2 losses. And that's why Larry Merchant never really believed in him. Well, Luis Ortiz, we can draw some parallels, can't we? Because other than losing to Deontay Wilder, he's got a win over Bryant Jennings, and that's it. There's nothing on Luis Ortiz's resume. His reputation has been built mainly from the loss to Deontay Wilder, and it's probably going to be another loss. You know, you never know. Heavyweight boxing, but it's probably going to be another loss to Wilder. He certainly had 1 loss. And a Bryant Jennings win, which was, nearly 5 years ago? I think 4 years ago. So, yeah, that's it. So maybe there are some parallels between Razor Roddick and Luis Ortiz. And like Razor Roddick, will Luis Ortiz get blasted away when he fights a young contender other than Deontay Wilder, who's a world champion, obviously? But let's say he goes and fights a Hrgovic. Let's say he goes and fights, I don't know, a Dylan White, a Jarrell Miller, one of the young, hungry contenders out there. Is he going to just get disposed of? And will the illusion be shattered that he was some kind of boogeyman of the heavyweight division? I suspect that will happen. If Luis Ortiz loses to Deontay Wilder, but continues to fight, I suspect he is going to get battered and stopped by one of these young contenders out here. Now, obviously, people are going to say, "Oh, he was old and Wilder finished him." Look, he's already old. So where are you going with that? He was old when he fought Wilder the first time. He's old now when Wilder fighting him the second time. Wilder is doing a pay-per-view against the guy who's 40 plus. He's at least 40, maybe older than that. 40 plus, never been a world champion, never beat anybody other than Bryant Jennings 4 years ago. And how good is Bryant Jennings really? Bryant Jennings, decent fringe contender, but that's it. So what's Ortiz's reputation built on? A bunch of smoke and mirrors, really. Yeah, he can fight. Razor Roddick could fight. But how good a fighter is he? You won't know until he fights some other people. Yeah? Styles really do make fights. I mean, you look at the 1970s when you had Ali, Foreman, Frazier, Ken Norton. Ali always struggled with Ken Norton. That was one style that he just could not get to grips with. He lost to Ken Norton. Then he had a couple wins over Ken Norton. But in the eyes of many, he actually lost to Ken Norton twice rather than once. And in fact, some people believe he lost to Ken Norton all 3 times. The second fight, I think, was a split decision. That style, yeah, Ali never got to grips with it. But yet, other fighters out there Ernie Shavers, a guy who Ali beat, destroyed Ken Norton. George Foreman, a guy who Ali beat, destroyed Ken Norton. After Norton had been destroyed, think about this. After he'd been destroyed by Foreman, he later went on to fight Ali in that rubber match. And he gave Ali absolute hell. So despite getting wiped out by George Foreman in 2 rounds, he still was able to trouble Ali. Styles make fights, you know. So maybe Luis Ortiz just has a style that is difficult for Deontay Wilder. I mean, we'll find out in this rematch exactly how difficult it is for Wilder, but maybe it's that case. He just has a style that's difficult for Wilder. Maybe there are other heavyweights in the top 10 who deal with him with relative ease. I suspect that is the case. I could be wrong, of course, because we don't know for sure until the fights happen. But I strongly suspect that that is the case, that he's going to go in there with some of these younger and they're just going to wipe him out. They're going to beat him relatively comfortably. Because again, when you look through his resume, there's nothing on it as a pro. Even as an amateur, there's not much on his resume. Now, he had a lot of amateur fights, yes. But in terms of who he actually beat, well, he seldom rose above domestic level as an amateur. You know, domestic tournaments in Cuba. One of the problems for Luis Ortiz is that Odlanier Solis was dominating the 200-pound division in Cuba for years. I mean, Solis, if you know, just go and have a look at Odlanier Solis's box rec and click on the amateur record of him. Click on the part that says wiki, and it will show you that amateur highlights of Odlanier Solis, and he was just a beast. And so Luis Ortiz struggled to contend with Odlanier Solis and his dominance. And there were other, you know, top 200-pounders at the time. So Ortiz's best achievements as an amateur, he lost in the Cuban National Championships multiple times, but he did win it in, let me see, what year was it? Yeah, he won the Cuban National Championships in 2006. He got stopped in the World Championships. That was the only major international tournament. And I say that because the Pan American Championships, is that really a major international tournament? But he did win the Pan American Championships, 91 kgs. But yeah, he was stopped in the World Championships and he lost in the Cuban National Championships multiple times. You know, he was picking up silvers, bronzes, silvers. Where are we at? That was the World Championships. Bronze medal in the Cuban National Championships. So yeah, he was not the top fighter, or even, you know, I don't know whether he was top 3, but he certainly wasn't the top fighter at 200 pounds in Cuba, and certainly nowhere near the top fighter at 200 pounds in the world as an amateur Luis Ortiz. So yeah, what did he really do as an amateur? He a solid amateur background, don't get it twisted. But on the international stage, there's really nothing there from Luis Ortiz. And as it goes for his pro record, it's something similar. There's really nothing there. Just a reputation because he hurt Deontay Wilder in 1 round and outboxed him for a couple rounds. I mean, several people have outboxed Deontay Wilder for a few rounds. Didn't Gerald Washington outbox Deontay Wilder for several rounds? Yes, he did. Are we ranting and raving about Gerald Washington? Yeah, he never hurt Wilder, but he did outbox him for several rounds. Didn't Artis Spilka outbox Deontay Wilder for several rounds? Yes, he did. You get where I'm going with this? Like, I'm just talking facts. Let's be realistic about it. Luis Ortiz has done nothing. So, yeah, I think the comparison with Razor Roddick is a good one. Some people will say, no, Razor Roddick deserves more credit because he did at least beat several former world champions. I think I counted 4. Was it 4? Greg Page, Michael Dokes, Bone Crusher Smith, Mike Weaver. Yeah, it is 4. So they're going to say, well, he beat 4 former world champions. That's better than anything Luis Ortiz has done as a pro. And He was also younger than Luis Ortiz when he was fighting these other contenders and champions, you know. Well, I say no contenders. He never fought for the world title, Razor Roddick, unless you count the Tommy Morrison fight. I think there was some kind of belt on the line for that, wasn't there? Yeah, the IBC. So some bogus belt. So he never fought for the world title, Razor Roddick. The closest he got was either that phony IBC belt or the final eliminator against Lennox Lewis. But yeah, he was young when he was fighting these guys, Razor Roddick. He wasn't some old man like Ortiz, who's God knows how old he really is. And the Tyson fights, he gave Mike Tyson a hell of a lot more trouble than Luis Ortiz gave Deontay Wilder. That's for sure. Particularly in the second fight. He hit Tyson with a lot of shots. Tyson was never as hurt as Wilder was when Wilder fought Ortiz. But there were more rounds where Roddick was landing big shots on Tyson than there was rounds where Ortiz was landing big shots on Wilder. So, anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening, I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.